Have you ever seen raindrops or snowflakes go back up into the sky after they've fallen down? Probably not. Because God's word is the same way. God gave us his word, sent us his word, so that it would do things here on earth. It would grow, it would be fruitful. How does it actually do that? Well, it happens when we read it, when we listen, when we learn from it. We start to change in our hearts. That's where the change takes place. So today we're going to talk about someone named Ezra. So listen closely. In his word, God tells his people things that they're to do and what they're not to do. There's a book in the Bible called Nehemiah. And in Nehemiah, we read about a group of Israelites who returned to their homeland, which is Jerusalem. That's where they were from, after being gone for many years. And they had to rebuild their wall there. And after they got those things done, Ezra, this man Ezra, who was a scribe or a priest, took God's word and he decided to read it out loud to the people so they could hear it, because not everybody had a copy of the Bible back then. The people worshiped God. They had a heart for God. And as Ezra began to read God's word, do you know what the people started to do? They started to cry. And not just a little bit. They cried because they realized that when Ezra was reading God's word, that they were hearing things that they should have been doing that they weren't. And they were sad about that because they wanted to change. But they were also happy to be hearing God's word finally read to them, and they wanted to rejoice. And as Ezra read God's word, he told them that one of God's commandments was to celebrate a special feast during the 7th month of the year. The leaders told the people that it was definitely time to celebrate this feast, and they were going to call it the Feast of Booths. Now, that's kind of a strange name, isn't it? But nonetheless, that's what they were going to call it, the Feast of Booths. This was a special time for God's people to remember how he had cared for them, how he had taken them out of Egypt, how he had helped them escape. The Israelites were commanded to gather tree branches and to build little huts that they were to live in for 7 days. 7 days that they would live under these little huts, even if they already had those homes. So sure enough, the Israelites went and gathered tree branches. They made their little huts, and they stayed in these huts during this Feast of Booths for 7 days with their family. Some of these huts were built on top of the roofs of their house. Some of these huts were built on the ground. They followed God's word. The Israelites hadn't celebrated this feast for many years, ever since Joshua had been alive. Since then, the Israelites had gotten away from God's commandment, and that's why God, and with Ezra's help, reminded them they needed to get back to remembering all the good things that God had done for them. And that starts with reading his word. Well, they built these huts, and sure enough, they had their feast for 7 days. The people's obedience brought much gladness to the heart of God, gladness to each other because they encouraged one another with hearing all the good things that God has done for them. They celebrated and they rejoiced in God's care for them. Wow! Now, you or I, we don't have to go out today and construct a hut to live in for 7 days, but you know what? You can go outside. You could find a tree and stand under it and say, wow, I'm going to pretend today that I'm practicing the Feast of Booths and that I can remember what God has done for me, the good things that he has allowed to happen in my life and the life of my family. All right, have a great day. Let's get to your worksheet.